Picture this. It's the middle of the night, you swing your legs out of bed, and instead of feeling that warm carpet, your foot splashes right into a cold puddle. Or maybe you just got home from a long day, you open the front door, and you hear it. The absolute worst sound imaginable. Rushing water where there definitely shouldn't be any. A burst pipe, a plumbing failure, a flood. It is literally absolute chaos, right? Panic sets in immediately. You're thrust right into the center of an emergency where your home, your sanctuary, is basically under attack. The very first question flashing through your mind is, what on earth do I do right now? Because let me tell you, what happens next dictates exactly how this whole thing plays out. And that brings us to one massive looming number, 24. In the world of property damage, this isn't just a number, guys. It is a ticking clock. You have exactly 24 hours to mitigate this disaster. See, when water breaches your home, it doesn't just sit there politely. It goes on the offensive. The actions you take within this precise 24-hour window will literally be the difference between a manageable cleanup and totally devastating long-term structural ruin, not to mention a severe mold infestation. The clock has already started. Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to this Vital Explainer, where we're going to break down exactly how to conquer that ticking clock. We'll map out a completely concrete, step-by-step action plan derived straight from professional water damage restoration protocols. Our goal today is to arm you with the exact knowledge you need so that if the worst does happen, you aren't frozen in panic. You're completely ready to act. So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the critical 24-hour window, the absolute necessity of safety first, the science of urgent extraction and drying, how to understand water categories, and finally, wrap it all up with your homeowner action plan. We're basically taking a highly stressful, chaotic situation and turning it into a clear, manageable checklist. Section 1, the critical 24-hour window. Let's look at why speed is absolutely everything here. The thing you really have to understand is that water is incredibly stealthy. Look at the early on column. Right after a leak, that moisture is concentrated. It's relatively accessible. Maybe it's just a puddle or a wet spot on the rug. But look at the as hours pass side. Water definitely does not stay put. It migrates. It actively seeks out the path of least resistance. It'll wick straight up into your drywall, seep deep down through the subfloors, and spread completely silently through wall cavities and ceiling systems. Literally every single hour you wait allows that water to penetrate deeper into those building materials, which basically multiplies the damage and the ultimate cost of the repair. So the absolutely crucial point to remember is this. Preventing mold starts with speed. You might mop up all the visible water a few hours after a flood and think, okay, phew, looks clean. But hidden moisture is your real enemy here. The risk of mold drastically increases when humidity stays elevated and those materials stay damp just underneath the surface. Visible mold rarely shows up right away, but if you fail to aggressively dry the area, you're essentially building a perfect hidden greenhouse for microbial growth later on. Moving right along to Section 2, Step 1, Safety First, time to stop the source. Listen, water and electricity are a deadly combination. Before you even think about grabbing a mop, your absolute first objective has to be safety. You need to address the immediate hazards and stop the water at its source. If it's a plumbing failure, go find and shut off your home's main water supply. But, and this is a massive warning, you must avoid entering any area where electricity might be involved. If water has come into contact with outlets, appliances, wiring, or your HVAC components, just stop. If the situation is even slightly unsafe, your immediate priority is evacuating and calling a qualified emergency response team. Please, do not become a casualty of your own home's flood. All right, Section 3, urgent extraction and drying. Let's talk about actually removing that standing water. Standing water has got to be removed immediately. And I am not talking about just tossing a few old bath towels on the floor. You need real pumps and heavy-duty wet vacuums that are appropriate for the specific water level and the surface type. Why the crazy rush? Well, because every minute that standing water just sits on your floor, it's being soaked up like a sponge by your drywall, your subfloors, and your insulation. Delays in extraction don't just leave you with a wetter room. They lead to deep moisture penetration, and that drastically increases the labor at the tear-out and the massive cost you'll face during later restoration stages. And this brilliantly illustrates one of the most dangerous myths in homeownership, the idea that drying is just airing out. Think about it. How many times have you had a small spill or leak and thought, I'll just open a window, maybe turn on the ceiling fan, it'll be fine? In a true water damage event, that is a total recipe for disaster. Natural evaporation is incredibly slow.
way, way too slow to beat our 24-hour clock.
To actually dry a property properly, you need the right professional equipment, because real restoration requires controlled drying. We are talking about commercial-grade dehumidifiers to literally pull the moisture right out of the air, and high-velocity air movers to force water to evaporate off surfaces. But honestly, just as importantly, you need moisture meters and hygrometers. Professionals rely on these exact tools to ensure affected materials actually reach safe dry thresholds deep down inside. It is never enough for a room to just feel a little less wet to the touch. The actual science of drying relies on hard data.
Let's jump to Section 4, Understanding Water Categories, because as it turns out, not all floods are equal. On one side of the spectrum, we have what's called clean water. Think of a burst drinking water supply line. Pretty straightforward. But on the other side, we have gray water. This comes from places like sinks or washing machines, and it carries potential chemical or biological contamination. The specific category of water that's flooding your home basically dictates everything. It determines the protective equipment you absolutely must wear, the intense disinfecting steps required, and whether certain porous materials can even be salvaged at all. For example, you might be able to dry out and save a carpet soaked in clean water, but if it's gray water, yeah, that carpet is more than likely a total loss. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the Homeowner Action Plan. These are your 5 golden rules. Okay, here is your playbook. 5 golden rules if you ever find yourself in the first 24 hours of a flood. Number 1, stop the source. Hit that shutoff valve immediately. 2, remove standing water promptly and, most importantly, safely. 3, start drying immediately with the appropriate ventilation and equipment. 4, document the damage. This one is huge. Take extensive photos and notes for your insurance and remediation planning before you start moving things around. And 5, avoid disturbing affected materials. Seriously, unless a professional tells you to, do not go ripping out drywall or tearing up carpets yourself. Doing that can actually release really dangerous contaminants into the air if the conditions are already compromised. The big takeaway here is that early assessment totally prevents guesswork. You really do not have to, and frankly shouldn't, carry the entire burden of this kind of emergency all on your own. Bringing in qualified restoration professionals as early as possible is hands down the smartest move you can make. A pro team will evaluate the materials, find all those sneaky hidden moisture pathways using thermal imaging and meters, and develop a highly targeted drying plan. They take the guesswork entirely off your shoulders. They set the specific goals for drying targets and make the really hard calls on what actually needs to be removed to save the structure. We've just seen exactly how fast water moves, how incredibly destructive hidden moisture can be, and the precise tools and steps required to fight back. Acting decisively within that very first 24 hours dramatically reduces secondary damage and gets your life back to normal so much faster. So I want to leave you with this final, crucial thought to consider. You now have the action plan. You know the exact hazards, and you fully understand the stakes. Will your home be ready when the clock starts? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and stay prepared out there.